Hi readers, Chris here. I just recently finished reading The Empire of Gold, the third and final book in the Daevabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. I thought it would be a great time to just talk about this series in general and kind of give my overall thoughts and feelings and hopefully help you decide if this is something that you want to read. When I first finished City of Brass way back in 2021, I did do a full-length breakdown of this specific book, so I will link that in the description box below in case you want to check it out. But today I am going to talk about the whole series. I am going to do a non-spoiler discussion, but as always, if there is interest in doing a spoiler discussion, please let me know in the comments section below. So to start us off, what is the Daevabad trilogy? Well, the Daevabad trilogy is a trilogy of books starting with the City of Brass, the Kingdom of Copper, and the Empire of Gold that are part of a adult fantasy series. This adult fantasy series is actually based on Middle Eastern and Egyptian mythology and lore. Super cool. The author of this series, S.A. Chakraborty, she talks a lot in her bio and stuff about how she's really into Islamic history and politics and art, and that definitely bleeds into this series because this series, like I said, is all based on Middle Eastern lore and Egyptian lore. To give you a quick kind of setup of this story and setup of this world, the world building of this world, the series opens, the City of Brass opens with a young girl named Nari. Nari is living in the streets of Cairo. She is kind of described as being like a thief. Not necessarily that she steals things, but she is kind of, if you think of Aladdin, she is kind of a Prince Ali character where she kind of takes from the rich, she gives to the poor, and also she is very well known in her community in Cairo for being someone that is a healer. She can heal people in a way that regular doctors can't. So Nari has kind of always had this, we'll call it supernatural ability. She doesn't know why, she doesn't know where it came from, it's just something that she's always had, and she uses it both to help her community, but also to help her get ahead. She doesn't necessarily help people out of the kindness of her heart. She does it because she wants to make a buck, if that makes sense. So she's not like a perfect, Robin Hood type character. She is a little flawed, she is a little selfish, but she's grown up on the streets and she's grown up alone. So she very much has the mentality that she needs to look out for herself. She needs to take care of herself because no one else is going to do it. Now, one night, and again, this happens very early on in the book, one night there is a healing that kind of goes awry. Something happens during this healing, and basically she ends up summoning this ancient jinn warrior. If you're not familiar with the term jinn, it's basically I'm going to say a genie, but I know that's not a direct comparison because us in America, when you hear the word genie, you think of Aladdin, big blue guy that grants wishes. But what jinn are in traditional Middle Eastern mythology is something completely different. The best thing I could do is say, if you are interested in learning more, definitely go Google it because I'm probably not the best person to describe that. But anyway, she summons this jinn warrior and he says, hey, these creatures, they're after you for your power. We need to escape and I'm going to take you to this magical city called Daevabad, the City of Brass. So Nari and this jinn warrior, his name is Dara, kind of go on the run. So they go on the run. They're being chased by these creatures called ifrits, which are creatures of fire. There's also, I think they get attacked by a peri, which is a creature of air. There's also the merid, creatures of the water. And they finally get to this city. And the city is supposed to be this beautiful city, this safe haven, but when they get there, they find out that the city is not exactly what they thought it would be, And the long story short here is that the ruling family that's currently ruling the city is not let's just say they're not the most well-liked family. The king, his name is Ghassan. The king uses basically fear and intimidation to kind of keep control of his city. Because in this city, in Daevabad, there are a ton of different factions. A ton of different factions. And this is something that I struggled with in the first book. I struggled with this a lot because there's a lot of different factions, there's a lot of different politics, there's a lot of interpoliticking, like some jinn are half human, but if you have human blood, you're a shafit and you're not as good as like a pure-blooded jinn, and some jinn are more into fire, some are more into water. There's a lot. So much so that in each of the books in this series, there is actually a glossary in the back. A glossary that actually breaks down, like, here's the beings of fire and what all those are. Here's beings of water, of earth. Here's some of the, common terminology in this world. There is a lot. And it is something that I struggled with in the first book. And honestly, even in the second book, it really took until book 3 for me to like really get a handle on all this different terminology. Because not only is there terminology for like all these different creatures and tribes, there's also terminology for like different positions, I guess you would say, within the government. So once Dara and Nari get to Daevabad, we also get to meet our third main character in this series, Ali. Prince Ali, fabulous he. I said this in a previous video, but Ali is a prince of Daevabad. In the first book, his father, Ghassan, is currently in charge of the city, and he has an older brother, Mutandir, who's kind of like next in line for the throne, so Ali is a second son. More on Ali later, but I want to just kind of close the loop on our world building here. When we get to Kingdom of Copper, Nari has kind of been in this magical city for a while now, and she's really trying to, again, she's pretty much in the same place that she was in book 1. In book 1, she was in the streets of Cairo trying to survive. Now she's in Daevabad in this palace, also trying to survive. Like, her circumstances have changed, but like how she's living her life and what she's trying to achieve hasn't really changed, which is really interesting. So in book 2 focuses again on our 3 main characters now. Nari, Dara, our Jinn warrior, and Ali. So let's talk about Dara for a minute. So like I mentioned in the first book, Dara is kind of summoned from nowhere. He takes Nari and he brings her to Daevabad because he thinks that this is the right thing to do and this is, gonna save her life. And when he gets there, he finds out that Daevabad is not the Daevabad that he remembers, because here's the thing. Dara has been alive for thousands of years. And thousands of years ago, there was like this big war that ultimately led to Ali's family being in charge of Daevabad. Now again, this is a high fantasy book, so there is a lot of history here, and again, you will need to rely on the glossary to kind of really absorb all of these facts. So here's my first point 10 minutes into this video that I want to make. If you are someone that likes epic fantasy with lots of world building, so think of Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, those are the 2 I can think of off the top of my head, but like those books that have like really big worlds with lots of different factions and lots of different interpersonal relationships and lots of stuff going on, lots of history, you will like this series. Because it has a lot of it. If you are not someone that likes that, if you like things that are more simple, more linear, it may be too much for you. So that's kind of the first point that I want to make. I just said this, but I'm gonna say it again. So to circle back to the world building again, like I mentioned, Ali's family is kind of in power in Daevabad, but what goes up must come down, and there's not a lot that happens, I think, personally, in Kingdom of Copper. So now I want to talk about Empire of Gold for a minute. In Empire of Gold starts with all of our characters in very different places than they were in the last book. Basically, book 2 is like all set up for the Empire of Gold. In the Empire of Gold, things have just gotten completely out of control. Everyone's at war with each other, everyone's fighting each other, and it seems like there is absolutely no hope for anyone to survive or for anyone to make peace. Like I had mentioned, there is wars that have been going on forever. There's all these interpersonal relationships and politics that have been going on forever. So how can anyone possibly hope to like fix any of that stuff, to make people, accept each other and move past it and heal and move on? So you'll notice that Empire of Gold is the chunkiest book out of the 3 because it has a lot to cover. It has a lot of ground to cover. But I have to say that I believe Empire of Gold is my favorite book of this trilogy. It's my favorite book because by the time we got to this book, I finally could wrap my head around the glossary of all the different terms and creatures and tribes and everything in history. 1. Number 2, I think it's got amazing character development for some of our characters, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then 3, it answers so many questions that up until this point in the series has remained unanswered. So this is definitely my favorite book of the series for those reasons. Obviously, that was a lot of setup. Maybe I'll cut some of that out, but we'll see. So now I want to talk about our 3 main characters a little bit more: Nari, Dara, and Ali. Obviously, this is a huge world, a huge story. There are a ton of side characters, a absolute ton, but these are the 3 I want to focus on, starting with Nari. Like I mentioned, she is a thief in the streets of Cairo. She almost kind of becomes a thief in Daevabad as well, even though she does start to use her power of healing to try and help people. So by the time that we get to the 3rd book, Empire of Gold, Nari actually finds herself back in Cairo and faced with a choice where she can either leave all the craziness that's going on in Daevabad behind and really go back to her normal life. She can settle down, run an apothecary, help people in her community, kind of live a quiet, peaceful life and just leave everything else behind. But at the same time, she has become this person of, we'll call it renown, this person of renown in Daevabad, the magical city, and she knows that there are people there that are relying on her to help them. So she has this very tough choice to make in Empire of Gold. Very tough choice. And I like that she is not a perfect heroine. She's not someone that's I have this power and I'm the most special, that kind of common YA trope. Nari is not like that at all. Nari struggles. Things don't always go well for her. Sometimes she comes out ahead. Sometimes she does not. Sometimes she fails. But at the end of the day, I think that no matter what Nari does or no matter what Nari chooses, she does always try to help others in her own way. So I really appreciate that about her character. I think it makes her very likable. Again, even though she's not perfect, I think because in general, her heart is usually in the right place, I think that makes her a really likable character. Now I'm going to talk about Dara for a little bit more, our Jinn warrior. Dara is a very interesting character because, like I said, Dara is someone who's been alive for a very long time and has had a number of different experiences in that lifetime. He's experienced war, he's experienced slavery, he's experienced grief and loss, he's experienced love. He has had so many different experiences, and through it all, he kind of has this this belief that what he is doing is right. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks or anyone else says, and it doesn't matter the consequences of his actions. He believes that he is doing the right thing to a point. And at first, that makes him a very attractive character to Nari, because Nari sees him as this, ancient warrior. He's strong, he's powerful, he's loved by his people. And even though he's done things in his past that some might say are horrible, Nari thinks that he is kind of on a pedestal, and he kind of feels the same way about her. But by the time we get to the third book, Dara really goes through we'll call it a crisis of faith. Dara starts to find out that what he believes, or what he thought he believed, may not be the right answer, because he finds himself on one side of a conflict and Nari's basically on the other side, but he cares about Nari. So what is he supposed to do? He's on the side that he thinks is the right side, is the winning side, but the person that he cares about is on the opposite. So Dara goes through a lot in the third book, a lot. And honestly, I think it took him way too long to come to the realization that what he was doing was wrong and the people that he was working with were not doing the right thing. I think it took him a little bit too long to get there, but he did get there eventually, so I do have to say that for him. And he finds himself in a very, I'll say, interesting position by the end of the book, by the end of the series, but without giving away spoilers, that's all I'm going to say. So that brings me to our third and final character, Ali, the Prince of Daevabad. Now, when we first meet Ali in book 1, he comes across as very, we'll say vain. He's very vain. He's very naive. He's focused on his little world. He doesn't think about the consequences of his actions, or even the consequences of the things that he says. And Ali's relationship with the rest of his family, with his father, with his older brother, who's the heir, Mutandir, who I really love Mutandir as a character. He has a sister, Zainab. She's really cool too. But I actually think Ali might be one of my favorite characters, because Ali, I think out of all three of them, goes on the biggest emotional journey. So, we meet Ali in book 1, and Ali becomes friends with Nari because Ali is very interested in history, and he's very interested in the human world. To him, humans are these mythical people that, everyone knows exist, but they don't know anything about them. So he wants to know everything about humans. And this also makes him sympathetic to some of the people in Daevabad that have half human blood. But because he has these sympathies towards some of these groups, it also gets him into trouble. It also gets him into trouble in ways that, the book goes into it in detail. I don't want to get into it here. So let's just say that he finds himself, kind of helping some people who want to, we'll say, rebel against the way that things are currently going in Daevabad. By the time we get to book 2, Ali finds himself in an even more interesting position. There's a fight that happens at the end of the first book, and during the course of that fight, and I'm being vague here, something happens to Ali where he finds himself in the presence of these creatures called the Marid, or the Merid, these water creatures that, no one knows that if they're there anymore, and all of a sudden Ali finds himself having been in the presence of the Merid, and all of a sudden he has these powers that no one can explain, these water powers. So he finds himself, with powers he can't explain, sort of like Nari. He finds himself kind of warring with his family because his ideals have changed thanks to Nari's influence, and he wants to see things change in Daevabad, but doesn't quite know the right way to go about making that change. So he really finds himself at odds with his family. He loves his family to death, but because of what he believes and what he wants to do, he finds himself at odds with them, which I think makes him a really interesting character. By the time we get to book 3, Ali has been separated from everything he's ever known. He's separated from his family, he's separated from his home, he's totally lost, he's completely alone, he doesn't understand what has happened, what is going on, he doesn't understand his powers still, he doesn't understand anything. And the journey that Ali takes in this 3rd book between, discovering who he really is, what he stands for, what he believes, where his powers come from, his history, his past. Ali goes through a journey in this book, a journey. And I love Nari. I think she's a great character, but I actually have to say, I think Ali might be my favorite character out of the 3 main character whose point of view chapters that we get. So all this to say, this kind of brings me around to my second point. If you are considering reading the Daevabad trilogy, if you like stories that have multiple POVs, so multiple point of view chapters, then this is something that you will really like, because not only do we follow Nari's journey, but we get to follow Dara and Ali as well. However, if you are someone, again, that likes a more linear, that likes a more, hey, it's just one person's point of view, their journey, then yeah, maybe you may not like that as much. So that would be my second point in talking about whether or not you should read the Daevabad trilogy. I was debating whether or not I wanted to talk more about the plot, but I feel like I've already covered it for the most part. So all I will say about the plot really quickly is that the plot of book 1 is really good. It's pretty fast-paced, it moves along, it's great to read. If you can get through all of the glossary challenges, I think you will enjoy it. However, I will say the Kingdom of Copper, I personally found it to be a little slow. There is a bunch of little stuff that happens, but I feel like the bigger story, the overarching story, not a lot happens. So I will say that about Kingdom of Copper, this is probably my least favorite book in the series. However, by the time we get to the Empire of Gold, absolutely everything happens in this book. Everything happens in this book. We find out who Nari really is, where she gets her powers from. We find out Ali and what happened to him at the end of the 1st book. We find out why he has powers that he shouldn't have. We find out about Dara's past and what really happened to him. And we find out so much stuff in Empire of Gold. It's insane. So I definitely think Empire of Gold has the best plot out of the 3 of these books. So, should you read the Daevabad trilogy? So 1, if you like high fantasy with a ton of world building, history, a ton of characters and politics and plot, yes, this series is for you. 2, if you like books that have multiple points of view, so multiple main characters, yes, this series is for you. If you like books that are based on other mythologies, like this one, like I said, is very heavily into Middle Eastern, yes, this series is for you. However, if any of those things make you question it, then it might be a bit much. If you're not used to reading this kind of high fantasy, it might be a bit much. But I would implore you to at least try and give the City of Brass a try. At least try and give this one a try to see if it's something that you think you might like. That is my rant about the Daevabad trilogy, a series that has turned out to be, I think, a definite standout that I've read in the past few years. So, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff coming your way soon. And if anyone wants me to talk spoilers in a separate video, let me know that as well. All right, everyone, happy reading.